Hello, I'm Christina Sharp, and this is the Believe in Something Bigger speaker series, How to Overcome Fear and Build a Faith That Sets You Free. I'm so happy today to have with me Shelley Clammer. She is a counsellor and an artist, and she uses expressive art workshops to achieve emotional healing. Welcome, Shelley.
Oh, thank you, Christina. Lovely to chat with you today.
Can you start by telling us a little bit more about who you are and what it is you do in the world?
Sure. So I have all kinds of self-led courses that employ spontaneous art almost as a way of sneaking by our social guard, our social presentation to find out what's hiding within. And also I offer groups where people can experiment with expressing their authentic selves in a group, and also one-to-one therapy where we can look at sort of what needs to be seen and heard that hasn't been seen and heard and loved before. So that's kind of sums up what I do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's why I wanted to get you onto this series and speak to you, because you're looking at our inner selves, trying to bring out our authenticity, discover who we really are, and you're doing it through art, which is a different means to the other speakers I have. So that's why I was really interested in getting you on and having a chat. So given that, can you talk a little bit about where our fears may be hiding, what they look like, how they might be uncovered as we begin this sort of process?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I loved that question most of all. And this morning I wrote this sort of like, almost like a map to how those fears happen. We're all born with a divine blueprint. You know, we have a soul and we come into a human body, but we start to develop a kind of a socialized amnesia where we forget. And we're actually designed to forget who we are in our blueprint of different spiritual teachers talk about how, you know, this is a learning ground, and the forgetting is part of how we create contrast, and it's a you know, the polarities that we work with, the dark and light, the strengthening sort of hero's journey that we all come here to go on. And so around the age of 7 we close off completely. That's when in the Waldorf school, Rudolf Steiner talked about the fontanelle, which is the openness, the crown chakra. It closes over. So we're completely socialized by age 7. And then we go into the world with our mask. And at some point, you know, so we become socialized in our church, our schools, our families, and we start to look outside of ourselves for love and approval, and we forget that we have this whole inner directive system. And then at some point we have an awakening experience, whether that's a big change or the death of a loved one or a loss of some kind, a crisis, or it even could be a source of great happiness where we recognize that we're larger than what we think we are, larger than our social mask. And so at that point, we have to begin sort of what I call is like a reparenting process. And I use my higher self as kind of, or my soul connection as sort of a reparent. And so this is what I offer through the spontaneous art and writing process, is starting to divide yourself almost in two, like a witness and a part that needs to express. So whatever wasn't accepted in society, in church, in school, in our families, will right away start to express in any kind of spontaneous creativity, because it wants to be seen, it wants to be heard, but our social guard is very, very, you know, carefully closing that in and stuffing it down. And so we can start to witness all these parts of self that we've left behind. And so part of that process is just integrating all the things that we need for our wholeness, for our purpose, for our higher self-expression. When we're more consolidated, our circle can widen, and that's when we start to live our purpose and think about other people and sharing our truth with other people. And so it sort of follows that there's a reparenting sort of stage before you can really, really be super authentic in the world. You know, otherwise we just keep getting re-triggered. We go out into society and we habitually stuff down the parts of ourselves that have felt rejected in the past. So yeah.
That's such an interesting description of the journey. I find it really helpful to how you talk about our socialization as being the means to sort of losing ourselves, and how that's normal and that is bound to happen. I think that gives us hope that we can go back in and blossom again, rediscover who we are with purpose.
Yes.
That should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. What sort of methods do you use then? You're talking about creativity, which seems a really intuitive way of starting to bring that out again.
I developed a bunch of creative practices that basically anybody could do. So you don't really have to be an artist. I have narrative therapy, I have phototherapy, I have just very, very simple collage therapy practices where you would just choose one image from a magazine and write a little poem about it. So there's a bit of poetry therapy. So it's all just very, very quick exercises, which I developed, by the way, working full time and just like really being in the world and not having a lot of time for creativity. And they're all designed to sort of, in a way, I always say, sort of like trick you out of your social presentation and just like, oh, geez, this part really wants to express itself. It really wants to be loved. It really wants to be seen. It wants to be heard. And I realized, you know, as I went along, that this, everything that I create and everything I do really has that at its root. That first I had to develop processes, which I now share with others, to love and see and hear myself. And now I feel great purpose, and the circle has widened around really deeply honoring those very, very tender, hidden, really rejected places in other people as well as a therapist, because I think that they become very scary when we repress them for a long time. They become quite distorted sometimes, and they come through as illness or great discomfort or body soreness. So just loving every aspect of ourselves. And I do it through the spontaneous creativity. That seems to be a good method for me and for other people who are very visual and like to see. It's kind of like I always say, it's like a form of self-mirroring. So if you haven't been mirrored for who you really are, if you create something that expresses an aspect of who you really are, then you can look at it and you can mirror yourself, right? So that's kind of the process of what I've developed, yes.
Yeah. There's two, excuse me, concepts that you've brought up as you've been speaking. One is mirroring, and the other you mentioned a little earlier, the hero's journey. Would you be able to expand a little bit on both of those, what they mean?
So just to use myself as an example, you know, when you think of us as human beings, we're very wired for survival. This goes back thousands and thousands of years. So we actually all experience a lot of fear in our bodies. It's just very biological. It's really sort of entrained into our nervous system. And some of us who have experienced trauma experience even more fear. So really at its essential root is, in some ways, going against our biology and our training and our conditioning to live our true self. That really is, in essence, what the hero or heroine's journey is almost deciding that fear is not going to stop us from expressing who we are, because people actually get very alarmed when we start to express our higher self. And it's quite stunning to witness. It's happened to me. And there is a period where if you've kept yourself very much in alignment with the way you were conditioned to be, there will be this authentic soul expression that's pressing up for expression, and it's very uncomfortable, you know. And once you start to express it, it makes everyone else who's living in the status quo and following all the rules extremely uncomfortable. So this is a form of social rejection that happens as our authentic self starts to seed itself and starts to express itself. And so this is where the fear comes up, is all of a sudden this very primal childhood fear. Really, it's not even childish, it's childhood biologically embedded fear that if we express ourselves in a way that's different from those around us who we love and care about, we might not even survive. We might die. It's really that drastic, that kind of fear that we feel.
I had an experience where I realized that I wasn't living for a long time in a way that was really expressing how I felt. I was living the way I was expected to live by others. And when I made that shift, people didn't know what to do with me anymore. I didn't fit anymore. And I did experience that level of rejection. And it really was quite frightening, quite disturbing. And how was I going to survive it?
Yes, indeed. And, our very purpose for coming here, like the very, very, very essence of the hero's journey is, in spiritual circles, they talk about becoming a Homo sapien to a Homo spiritus. We have to birth our spiritual self, but everything is encoded in us to not do that. Like all our social systems say, no, follow the rules. This is how economy works. This is how church works. This is how school works. And so, number one, on the hero's journey, we have to start to question every social system that doesn't let us express who we are, that doesn't let us question, that doesn't let us be honest about the truth of ourselves. Right there is the seed. Like, if I can't express my truth here, then that's when the hero's journey really begins, like you said. And I too have experienced loss of my social groups as well. And it's a terrifying period. It's absolutely terrifying because you have to go from this I always call it almost like a milky comfort of sort of just fitting in and being really, really accepted by everybody, to this place where there's like almost like a gap before the old life leaves, or between when the old life leaves and the new authentic life begins, where you have to go very seriously. It's almost like the dark night of the soul, really, where you go in. And I went through that in my 30s for, almost a period of 10 years, where I really had to just learn how to be very inner directed, where I'd been extremely outer directed before. So really, really worried about what people thought of me, really, really caretaking other people, and not living from my own prime directives, my own soul's directives. So yes, it does create a bit or a lot of chaos at first, and then there's that terrible fear, like, oh no, I don't belong. And in truth, you don't belong on the outside. You are in a system where everyone's agreeing that we're gonna soothe each other's egos, and instead of express the truth of our soul. And so yeah, it's a very uncomfortable period. So it's during that period that we need to start self-mirroring. And I guess that's where the mirroring comes back in, to bring your question full circle, is that when we start to express ourselves authentically, if in fact our social groups do fall away, or feel uncomfortable, or even resist or fight against our true self-expression, we have to develop ways to self-mirror in a way that's very soothing and comforting and daily. And I had a really hard time with it. Like, I had to do spontaneous art on my lunch hour at work sometimes, just because I would lose touch. I would go out and I would caretake, and I would forget who I was in my soul connection. So I had to develop really quite rigorous daily processes to stay within and comfort myself and mirror myself there.
I think there's such a strength in that, and to get to the point where you're being disciplined in helping yourself in that way, because I think there's a temptation when you're suffering that degree of pain and isolation, just to go through what daily motions that you have so you don't have to deal with it. But of course you can't grow until you are working through it on an ongoing basis.
That's right. And that's that period of recovering all those pieces that you just kind of put out there. You kind of, in a way, we kind of abandon ourselves to fit in socially. So we abandon certain aspects of ourselves that need to be reclaimed and mirrored and loved and accepted. And those are all very essential pieces of our strength that we need on our hero's journey, that we need to express our higher soul self purpose here. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
There's such a lot in that. It's so encouraging to know how we can help ourselves in this way, and then be able to reconnect authentically to people that are going to accept us as we are because we accept ourselves.
Yes, yes. You know, I just have one thing to say that because we're talking about faith here as well. And so here we've talked this whole thing about social systems and also about other people and the need to self-mirror. And one thing that really came through for me very, very, very early on, I went on a process painting retreat, which is just very, very authentic painting where you just paint from within and you don't, and at the time I was a gallery artist. And so this was very revolutionary for me to paint very spontaneously. And what came through actually in those first process paintings, those authentic, spontaneous paintings, was that I would be getting a host of spiritual support, if not human support. And there was a period where I did feel very alone and very isolated. And so just as we are waiting to find our new authentic community, so too, I think that is the crisis of the dark night of the soul, where we start to turn to more subtle support as well, right? Mm-hmm. Like the support that's not in human form, because there is a legion I've seen through my visual expressions, a legion of spiritual support for us, even when we are all alone too. So, you know, the self-mirroring and that strength building of that process. And then also, you know, I'm feeling so alone here, and calling in the subtle support, you know, that's not in human form. Because human beings, it's very, very challenging unless someone is extremely spiritually developed it's very challenging for human beings to love us unconditionally for all parts of ourselves. They have to be really, really, you know, have done a lot of inner work.
No, that's beautiful. It's beautiful to know that we can gain access to support on that different level of spiritual support. We're coming towards the close of our interview, but I'm asking everybody to just sum up their idea of what their something bigger is.
Oh, that's a beautiful question too. Kind of like, it's just like your questions are stunningly beautiful, I think. They're big questions. You know, something bigger, what you can see behind my head, I love circles. And so I love to paint circles and I love to consider circles. So I think that, you know, we ever widen our circles. And so we at some point have to widen our circle to include all aspects of ourself into unconditional love. And we have that job to do. And we can draw upon spiritual support for that. And once we do that, they're really, for me, my something bigger right now is because I have done a ton of emotional work. I feel fairly completely integrated. In fact, I feel like I've done a lot of healing work, not only for myself, but for my ancestry and, you know, like it, and now I feel very, very sort of, my heart feels wide open to the world. And so that circle feels very big because I feel very sort of quite whole and quite complete in myself and my own emotional work journey. And so for me, the something bigger right now is I'm really sensing more into those subtle realms of support on a more consistent basis, like not only my higher self, but you know, the support I sense in nature and the support I sense in maybe guides or you know, whatever, you know, some people believe in angels, or just that there's this whole legion of support around me that's even larger than this world, you know. So I've you know, I found an authentic community for myself, and now I feel in this very giving phase of my life, which sort of wraps itself around the world. And now I'm wondering at this place, what is bigger than this world? So I have a daily mandala practice where I meditate, and my meditations, I just brought my journal to show you, like I do a mandala every day. And I'm rigorously working on the deepest levels of biological fear right now. And really affirming, you know, as I do my daily practices, that all is well, and, you know, and just practicing a very, very deep level of calm, which is lovely because it's opening me up to subtle realms of support on a more consistent basis that isn't even reliant on human support, you know. So,
well, thank you for sharing that and for sharing your mandala. You know, as you were speaking about that support, I was feeling uplifted. As you were speaking about the circles, I was feeling uplifted. So that really is beautiful.
oh, good. Lovely.
Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today.
Oh,
So much in there to work through and use and be encouraged by and help us develop into who we are supposed to be. Thank you so much, Shelley, for being with us.
oh, thank you, Christina. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. ExpressiveArtWorkshops.com